I mean, overall, your stance on professional wrestling as it stands right now, just a few sentences here when you're looking at WWE compared to a TNA, let's say. I mean, what do you like about each of these products right now that's out, and what do you dislike?
Well, I'll be blunt. I think both products are god-awful right now. People think that when Vince McMahon took over wrestling by driving all the smaller promotions out of business, that was a good thing. That definitely was not. It was a terrible thing for the business. There's no competition now. That's what drove Vince McMahon during the Monday Night Wars to have such a great product, to come up with a character like Stone Cold Steve Austin, or rather to take a character that Steve and Vince Russo came up with and, go the distance with him, make him a top guy. Now Vince McMahon just serves agendas. He books out of revenge. He is, like Paul Heyman said, the proverbial audience of one. Vince won the war, but that certainly doesn't mean he knows more than anyone about wrestling. He doesn't. It's not even close. He just had a vision back in the 80s, a vision that broke the trust, by the way, and since then, he's used money to be a bully. Look at WWE now. Vince just serves agendas. He pleases himself. As I said earlier, when Vince was at his best, it was because competition made him sharp. Now, there's no competition. The quality of the wrestling product overall, including WWE, is about 1/10 of what it was in the mid to late 90s. ECW was better in its heyday than either promotion is now, to say nothing of being a bigger thorn in the side of WWE and ECW back in 95, 96 than TNA is to WWE right now. I just think there's no pressure, no competition. TNA is Dixie Carter's lost leader. WWE is so firmly entrenched as number one, it doesn't matter if the product's good or bad. And the wrestling fans that are still out there, they just watch and attend and buy pay-per-views by rote, no other reason.
Well, what do you make of, the fact that WWE, it looks like they're trying all of these new, within, let's say, the past year, you've had the $1 Million Mania, you've got this new guest host idea, they ran this huge Donald Trump angle a couple weeks ago. I mean, it looks like Vince McMahon is trying something. Do you think that's out of a necessity to help the show, or just because it entertains him?
Well, what's he trying? Whatever he's trying, it has nothing to do with wrestling.
Right.
Donald Trump has nothing to do with wrestling. The $1 Million giveaway had nothing to do with wrestling. Mm-hmm. He's just desperate. He's run out of ideas. His script writers, his daughter, they certainly don't know what they're doing. I mean, look at tonight, Seth Green. Who in Blue Blazes is Seth Green? What does he bring to the program? What, now Hunter has to trade a guest spot on Robot Chicken? Come on, give me a break. What good does that do WWE? It reminds me of back in the day when Mad TV did a co-promotion with WCW. That's when I was with Turner. Mad TV actually got to call the shots in that cross-promotion. Nitro had like 10 times the ratings of Mad TV. Why did Bret Hart have to sell for Will Sasso? But wrestling people are deep down ashamed of being in wrestling, and they kowtow to people from real, quote-unquote, TV. Come on, who the heck is Seth Green? He's a nobody at this point, and yet it's the centerpiece of Raw tonight. That's just horrendous booking, just a non-existent thought process.
Now, I want to talk more about the celebrity guest idea, a little bit later on. Nick, I know you wrote a column previewing Raw tonight on WrestleZone that kind of talked about pretty much the same thought process as far as what does it really do for Raw. But that being said, I also want to bring up, let's look at this past Saturday night, UFC 100 and Brock Lesnar, and even though this isn't necessarily a UFC program, I mean, it is somewhat, relevant. I kind of want to ask both of you and bring up what I think was pure genius on Brock Lesnar's part. I mean, what the MMA purist and Dana White and those people were just thinking, that's the WWE coming out of him, and we don't want that stuff here. Is there any? I know that you're not supposed to necessarily compare them, but out of curiosity, when you see UFC on the rise, and with Brock Lesnar, of course, being the forefront of all of that, is there anything in your mind? Because wrestling just seems to, pale in comparison right now compared to this real life fighting. Is there anything Vince McMahon and the WWE can take maybe away from the UFC that obviously I think the argument could be made that UFC could take a lot away from professional wrestling, but is there anything that WWE and Vince McMahon could do to sharpen its product right now and renew interest?
Well, MMA has finally discovered the formula it should have many years ago, which is the best way of marketing the product. The way to sell it best is pro wrestling heat, pro wrestling style invective, as we saw from Brock Lesnar Saturday night, and compelling real fights. Aside of coming up with storylines that cause the fan to suspend disbelief, which is the primary goal of wrestling, but something that's unfortunately been forgotten for a long, long time, I don't know what WWE or TNA can do to keep up with UFC. Brock Lesnar provides such a crossover for fans of the sports entertainment genre, and really what we saw Saturday night, the heat in the Mandalay Bay Arena, the heat that we've seen all over message boards and blogs and MMA columns since Brock Lesnar went a little bit nuts after his win over Frank Mir, it really makes wrestling, and for that matter boxing, seem so passé. I don't know how you catch up to real, legitimate heat like we saw Saturday night at UFC.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I absolutely, it was really crazy to watch. I mean, you know, and at the same time, and I've had this argument before with you, Chris, and I'll ask you this, Mark, you know, I feel like professional wrestling has gotten away from the idea of wrestling. But then again, there are people that will always argue that, you know, and I know we've actually had this argument with Glenn Gilberti before, you know, when he's come on, you know, always saying, you know, look, the focus of wrestling shouldn't even really be on free television about the wrestling. It's about creating the storyline. But I feel like in this time,
yeah, that's,
you know,
that's why Glenn's a bouncer in a strip club now, because he thinks stuff like that.
You know, but I think in this time where the emphasis is being put on, you know, the Ultimate Fighting blends such a great, I mean, it's brutal. You know, and I think some of that sports athleticism and brutality is what's missing in professional wrestling. I mean, look at the focus of tonight's Monday Night Raw. It's Seth Green. It doesn't have anything to do with professional wrestling. And my idea would be to get back to a certain period of time when it was about the in-ring wrestling, where at least you're creating a product that, even though it's worked, is still creating the illusion that it is about fighting as opposed to bad comedy segments.
Well, it's just laziness to me. It's not a matter of choosing a path. It's just laziness to me. It's like, okay, let's have a new general manager come and wacky hijinks will ensue. Let's make Batista the GM of Raw. Gee, won't Legacy be upset? It's too simple. It's too predictable. It's too trite. We've just seen it all before. The celebrity thing would mean something if you could get legit celebrities to be involved, but Trump, because of his reality TV show, has actually seen his celebrity diminish, in my opinion. He's become passé. As I said, Seth Green, what's his claim to fame? Being a bit player on Entourage, a bit player on that 70s show? He's a nobody now. I mean, come on. The Cartoon Network, give me a break. So it's just laziness. I mean, instead of sitting down and writing storylines, WWE's found a way to try to exorcise, their shame at being involved in wrestling, and they're indulging laziness and not having to write coherent storylines where fans suspend belief by saying, hey, look, a celebrity, Seth Green, aren't we all excited? Or Donald Trump or whoever. And the lack of passion in the crowd at events like this is just tangible. You know, you don't judge how well your promotion's doing by the ratings or the crowds, because that's a trickle down from stuff that happened 2 or 3 months ago in many cases. At WCW, we didn't see the end coming until it was already there. Well, actually, I did, but nobody would listen. You judge what you're doing that night by how the crowd reacts that night. And WWE crowds are totally dead.
Right. You guys are listening to Mark Madden. He joins the Voice of Wrestling as a regular host now. Mark, let me ask you this. Obviously, we've known for forever now wrestling is star-driven. When you think about both WWE and TNA, who are the guys at the top for you, and what do you think about how WWE and TNA have created stars in the last couple of years?
Well, TNA is a non-starter. I mean, they're basically non-existent. They've minimized Kurt Angle. and I believe he's the most talented performer in wrestling right now, so that's extremely hard to do. They brought in Mick Foley to point his career where he can't do anything, and all that's done is provide a new lease on life for the other guys who can't do anything, like the Dudleys,
right,
who spent their whole career crowing that we're the best tag team in wrestling, and ironically, they're a lot closer to being the worst. They've taken Samoa Joe, the killing machine from the islands, and made him just another fat guy.
Right.
That program's so awful, I can't even begin to describe what they would have to do to make it even marginally watchable. As far as WWE goes, the best guy there is by far Chris Jericho right now. But that's due to his wrestling knowledge and his politicking knowledge as well. He's smart because he knows how to stay out of harm's way. He doesn't often work with guys like Triple H that can Bigfoot him. He works with guys like Michaels and Ray Jr. and old school guys like Piper and Steamboat for that Mania feud.